Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Jassim Azzawi. Violence is back with a vengeance in Iraq. Explosions in Baghdad have become common again. Secret torture chambers are fueling the cycle of hatred. Even al-Mahdi army has flexed its muscle again in direct challenge to the Iraqi government. And although the Iraqi army has eliminated the two leading figures of al-Qaeda in Iraq, experts believe al-Qaeda's horrifying attacks will continue for a long time. Some Iraqi politicians blame the current paralysis to form a new government as the main reason for the resurgence in violence. But do they comprehend the severity of what they are saying? Are they holding their rivals directly responsible for instigating this violence? And now I'm joined from Baghdad by our reporter Mike Hanna. Mike, now that we have a confirmation by the Iraqi government and US forces in Iraq that the two leading figures of al-Qaeda, Abu Umar al-Baghdadi and Abu Ayyub al-Musri, have been eliminated, does the Iraqi government believe the horrifying, spectacular operations of al-Qaeda is over?
Well, the events on the ground show that this is certainly not the case. In the days since the operation was conducted that led to the deaths of those two senior figures, there has been a wave of violence, a wave of bomb attacks in various parts of the country, and in particular here in Baghdad. Now, the government says that al-Qaeda in Iraq is responsible for these attacks. It acknowledges that the attacks are in response for its operations against the al-Qaeda leaders, and it insists that the attacks that we've seen are, as they put it, the last flurry of a dying organization. Well, that is what the government believes, but certainly on the ground there is no sign of a diminishment of the violence that has broken out. And equally, we do know from past experience that the leadership of al-Qaeda in Iraq, a very shadowy organization which the Americans in the past refused to acknowledge its existence, the leadership figures have been changed in the past, and very quickly too. And there is a report on the organization's purported website that new leadership will be announced in the days to come. So clearly at this particular point it would be premature to say that the threat posed by al-Qaeda in Iraq has been completely eradicated, Jassim.
Meanwhile, the Iraqi government is failing to form a new government since the March 7 election, and that is slated to continue for a long time. Does this gap, this paralysis to form a new government, is adding to the resurgence and violence in Iraq?
Well, the one thing that's clear is that this is certainly the public perception. Whether that is the case or not, people that we have spoken to throughout the areas of Baghdad are absolutely insistent that there is a vacuum in governance at present, and that vacuum is being filled by groups intent on destabilizing the situation. Now, as speculation too, we've heard that it is perhaps in the political interests of some groups to encourage in some ways ongoing violence, to use it as a leverage in the ongoing political negotiations to get the alliances necessary to form a government. There's been another spin-off too of this political vacuum. We've seen groups such as the Mahdi army in Sada City, for example, suggest that since the government is not able to protect the residents of that area, then they would need to protect them themselves, offering to assist security forces at certain locations, once again raising the specter of a militia that had largely been disbanded in recent years. We have heard the same, for example, in the Sunni neighborhood of Adamir, where we hear talk among the awakening council groups that had largely disbanded, though keeping their structure in place, that they would need to do more to protect themselves.
Mike Hanna, thank you very much for that report. And now I'm joined from Basra by Abdul Hadi al-Hassani, a member of the Iraqi parliament from the State of Law Coalition, and from London by Sami Ramadani, a professor of applied social sciences at London Metropolitan University. Gentlemen, welcome to Inside Iraq. Abdul Hadi al-Hassani, for a long time, almost 2 years, the Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki kept saying, I am the man of security. I was able to achieve security for Iraq. And yet, over the past few months, and as recent as the last 2 months, we have seen spectacular operations, bombings, explosions. People in their hundreds are dying. How do you explain the failure of the Iraqi government, despite the huge army and the police, to stem the tide of violence?
Thank you. Actually, I believe that Iraq had passed through more difficult period of time of terrorism and atrocity, and it will be easier even to now overcome this hurdle simply because the security now more equipped, better really trained, and more ready to deal with the more violence. The terrorists and the Qaeda and the cradle of the Qaeda from the Saddamese gangs, they have all gathered their own power and they are trying their own best to destroy the political process by all means and methods. However, they failed badly, though they have succeeded here and there, but the exaggeration over some media about the violence.
Abdul Hadi al-Hassani, we saw horrific images. People in their hundreds, buildings are destroyed, and operations left and right all over Baghdad and other provinces in Iraq. So how can you just diminish, how can you just dismiss this as these are just operations here and there? People in their hundreds, I'm telling you, they are dead.
Well, we know exactly. I am in Iraq. Yesterday I was in Baghdad. There was one in Abi Shahr process. Only one person had unfortunately murdered and 10 injured, and the media had really exaggerated badly about the number of people dead. Only in Baghdad mostly now, maybe some very small accident and terrorist attack in Ramadi or Mosul. The rest of Iraq, the south, is very peaceful. We know very clearly that it is the media and the politician and the agenda, hidden agenda behind bigger propaganda to really topple the political process
so
in
you
Iraq.
Keep saying, you are repeating yourself again. Let me go to Sami Ramadani. Listening to Abdul Hadi al-Hassani.
I've been believing I am there, and anybody who claiming otherwise, let him come and see what exactly in Iraq.
Sami Ramadani, listening hold on just a second, please. Listening Abdul Hadi al-Hassani as if there is nothing going on in Iraq. No death, no destructions, no spectacular operations. This is just a propaganda by the media. Everything is calm and cool and collected in Iraq.
Well, the answer to that is simple. Ask ordinary Iraqis in the streets, whether in Baghdad or wherever. One of the first things they mention, apart from the collapse of the services to their homes and in their streets, they mention the question of security. So it's really the Iraqi people who are raising that to the top of the agenda as one of the things they have been lacking, lack of security for their families, for their children, and so on. And I think one has to also realize that these problems are probably bigger even than Maliki and the government. And I can cite three very important reasons as to why the question of violence is not going away from Iraq. One is the squabbles within the political groupings of the so-called political process. Second is the fragmentation of the Iraqi state since the occupation of Iraq. And third, and the most important reason perhaps, is the occupation itself, which is rather absent now in the dialogue and the squabbles and quarrels between the various political forces within the political process or the official process. And I think these underlying reasons are the ones that the Iraqi government and even the political opposition to it from within the political process are forgetting or are trying to avoid talking about, because they themselves are all involved in this defragmentation process, accepting the occupation as a normality, and so on and so forth.
Before we discuss one or two or three of these items that you brought to the table, Sami Ramadani, let me go back to Abdul Hadi al-Hassani and tell him, on a personal level, to be honest with you, I am surprised and shocked with your cavalier attitudes towards this violence. You are dismissing it as nothing more than a propaganda and nothing more than a media. On a personal level, it's not a good reflection on you, on your party, on your prime minister. Actually, they took you to task when it came to the election simply because of the failure to stem the tide of violence.
When a terrorist waging a war against Iraq, we know what they are up to. They use all the resources, except especially the propaganda of the media. I didn't say there is no violence. I said we overcome many difficult periods, more worse violence. And we believe, as you compare it 2 years ago, was the sectarian killing in the street, was every day there is more than 100 people get killed. Now we heard in every 3-4 weeks there's some really terrorist attack here there. They are not insurgents, by the way, they are terrorists. And we know they are terrorists who are even helping them, who assisting them, who cradle them. And we were wishing and hoping now even that the media could see the truth as it is, not as they want to see it. And that's what I am saying, and this is my reputation.
We are member of the media, Abdul-Hadi Hassani.
I drove yesterday from Baghdad at really afternoon and arrived at midnight to Basra, and it was calm and nice, and it is really the situation not as bad as the image in the media, and we need to reflect the truth, and the real media reflecting the truth, and we try to be honest politician, not politician who's up to position or up to really propaganda.
We are member of the media, and we try to shed light on the truth. And so one of those truths is the discovery of a torture chamber in the old Iraqi airport of al-Muthanna. And more than 437 people, they were found there. Some of them, they were tortured severely. They range in age between just some kids to a very old man. And yet al-Maliki's first reaction, his first perfunctory reaction to say, I did not know about it. How do you explain that such a horrific torture chamber, which is fueling the hatred and the violence, and al-Maliki Prime Minister, his very force, is responsible for that torture chamber? He says, I did not know about it.
No, he didn't say he didn't know about the prison. He didn't know that there's any secret prison. Neither he know there is any torturing in the prison, because this is a prison in the Muthanna. Everybody knows about it. And even the Minister of Human Rights, the lady, she had been herself been there, and she had said there are 7 judges, investigating judges. How come we judge there, investigating judges, and it's secret? It is open, but we don't know there is any torturing, and we already arrested the people who tortured the prisoners, and this also prison had already been closed. And the disclosure and propaganda of Los Angeles newspaper had done on the timing when al-Masri and Abu Ayyub al-Masri and when Abu Amr al-Baghdadi being get killed, at the same time they released this information. So how coincidence happened during the same time? This is the one to dent the image of the Iraq and image of the Maliki, because they want to show that he is not a man of a good really ability to secure the security in Iraq.
Let me listen to Sami Ramadani.
We know
first.
what is going on.
Sami Ramadani, this is nothing more than a conspiracy by the LA Times. You know, they coincided the revelation of this secret chamber simply because to embarrass al-Maliki when he managed to kill Abu Umar al-Baghdadi and Abu Ayyub al-Masri. Do you buy the story?
I don't, and I think Mr. Hassani is being a bit disingenuous here. Only the other day, Muqtada al-Sadr appeared on the TV screens to say that he's got amongst his own supporters some 2,000 prisoners. And we all know they have been tortured, some were killed, and so on. So there are tens of thousands of prisoners in Iraq. This was just one of the places they discovered. And these prisoners have been imprisoned either by Iraqi government forces, by the occupation forces. Torture is rife in Iraq. And really, Mr. Hassani should be talking about how to eliminate it, how to get rid of it, rather than to simplify the problem and say that it's the Los Angeles Times. The terrorists in Iraq, whether they are of the al-Qaeda type or even some former regime type terrorist actions, these things cannot stay for the last seven years and continue if there aren't these underlying problems that I've been talking about. And to say that the problem itself doesn't exist becomes a really serious part of the problem. If the torture in the prison is not be known to the government, then in my eyes and in the eyes of a lot of Iraqis, the problem
More
is even bigger.
Sami Ramadani, let me just add something to you said, and that is Abdul-Hadi al-Hassani. If it wasn't for the LA Times revelation and the damning article, most Iraqis believe, and most experts believe, the Iraqi government wouldn't have acknowledged its existence or done anything about it.
By the way, it's been closed and being the prisoners and the really people who have been arrested already been released.
How wonderful!
And been
How wonderful! Finally, it's being closed.
Before the Los Angeles, but however, the Los Angeles has really have issued its own paper on that day. Simply, as I said, I didn't say that we accept. On contrary, I asked personally public inquiry about if there's any torturing. They are human beings. We're not supposed to torture anybody. We're not supposed to violate any human rights of any person. However, this prison had been closed before even Los Angeles had released its own really issue.
That is patently not true. That is absolutely not true, Abdul Hadi al-Hassani, and I don't want to quibble with you because we know the deadline.
I know that.
Let's not quibble with you about it. But how do you explain the return of al-Mahdi army on the streets? Right now, even al-Muqtada al-Sadr is calling on his people to be alert and to go back to protection of the streets and the mosque and al-Husayniyat. These people, they committed some of the most horrific atrocities in all of Iraq, and no wonder it was banned and disbanded by al-Maliki and by the Iraqi army. Now they are coming back.
We disagree with any militia or insurgent from any group, whatever. But after what's happened last Friday, there's 5 explosions and terrorist attack in most of Baghdad. Some people get killed, and yes, on that issue, on that day, Sayyid Muqtada al-Sadr had really called on the own people, if they want, we could assist, and we are saying
they
security
came out in force. In Najaf, they came out in force.
We said, as a state who has a security forces, we said no, thank you, thanks, but no thanks. We have a security forces which are capable of looking after their own people. We are not allowing any militia or any manpower to come to protect the security and safety of the people. We have authorized people.
We will see later on, Abdul Hadi al-Hassani, if the Iraqi government, hold on a second, we will see whether the Iraqi government is capable to challenge al-Mahdi and his militia later on. As he said, he is preparing them to come back again. But Sami Ramadani, explain to me, what does it mean when some Iraqi politicians, they say the current paralysis and the inability to form a new government is adding fuel and making this violence come back with vengeance? What does that mean? Are they simply saying that one faction is instigating the violence or perhaps even directly responsible for the violence? If that is the case, it's a horrible story.
It is. Although one has to be honest and say there is no direct evidence that any of these political forces are directly involved in this violence. But really, if you look at the reality of the situation, such high-level squabbles, conflicts, defragmentation is a rife atmosphere for the spread of violence and terrorism and gangsterism, kidnappings, and so on. It's not all political violence. There is all sorts of violence in Iraqi society today. State-sponsored violence, like the incidents of torture. By the way, assassinations are rife in Baghdad. It is not only the spectacular violence, but there are assassinations. And nobody is quite sure who's carrying them out. So there is an atmosphere which is rife in terms of the prevalence of violence, and the squabbles between the political forces, which are somehow mostly allied to the United States ultimately, seem to be encouraging and feeding into this cycle of violence.
Not
and the
only
total
that,
the decentralization of the Iraqi state, or rather defragmentation in the name of decentralization, because I don't think it's really decentralization, it's fragmentation. It has weakened the Iraqi state to such an extent that it is incapable of really keeping security in the country.
Not only that, there is no accountability, Abdul Hadi al-Hassani. Just at the top of the show, you said we are going to go after those responsible for the torture, and yet we know by past experience, nothing like that has ever happened. The former Interior Minister, Bayan Salwaq Jabr, who is now the current Finance Minister, acknowledged himself that he was in direct knowledge and perhaps even encouraged some of this torture that happened in Al-Jadiriyah. Absolutely nothing happened to him.
Well, I believe there has to be an inquiry on anybody who had.
It has been 5 years, Abdul Hadi al-Hassani. 5 years. It has been 5 years.
Yes, simply nobody had called for public inquiry or inquiry. However,
Excuse
on
me?
this prisoner,
Excuse
for
me?
example,
Nobody called for public inquiry? The people whose members of their family have been tortured and killed, they called for inquiry.
When we establish government of national unity, the minister by himself nominated as the Minister of Finance, nobody had object from political people, nobody had object. And on this occasion, for example, 3 of the officers from the Muthanna...
You're not doing yourself any justice by saying this, Abdul Hadi al-Hassani. You're losing your credibility by saying that nobody called for a public inquiry. The family of the people who were killed and tortured, listening to you, they will lose all credibility, not only in you, but also in the Iraqi government.
With my pleasure.
You are willing to lose your credibility.
I am saying.
You are willing to use credibility.
You try to dent my reputation. Thanks to you.
No, I'm just saying. Bayan Salah Jabr admitted that he tortured people in Al-Jazeera, and nothing happened to him.
This is not the way to... Excuse me. This is not the way to communicate with me, please. Don't accuse me for something which I never said.
I'm asking you, where is the accountability? Where is the accountability for Bayan Salah Jabr?
Don't accuse me by something I didn't say. This is not the right way. Al-Zawi, this is not the right way.
I am asking you for the last time, what is the accountability for Bayan Salah Jabr?
You have to respect each other's opinion. No, don't. If you have something against him, you go to there is court of international court. Go and ask for international court to do something. Don't accuse me of not doing so and so. I am a member of parliament. I criticize anybody who torture anybody. I criticize any prison who do any not fairness to other human rights. However, don't accuse me on anything which I haven't committed, neither said nor do. Don't do that. This is not good for you, neither for the Jazeera.
Abdul Hadi al-Hassani, nobody accused you directly. You are responsible for torture.
You are accusing now. You are saying something which I'm not saying.
Let me repeat myself question
again. You are accusing me.
Let me ask you again. Bayan Salah Jabr admitted himself that he was in knowledge of the torture chamber that happened in Al-Jazeera. And that was almost 5 years ago. Nothing happened to him. My question is to you, why?
We have our legislation body. If you have something, go ask them. Why not? Not asking me. This is not my.
You are a member of parliament. I'm asking
to say something which is. I am a person who is supposed to take part in legislation law and monitoring the performance of the government. And that's what's my responsibility. I'm not being a dictator to dictate everything. We are saying everybody has his own duty and obligation, and they have to be frank.
You made yourself
and be
very clear.
And to be honest and to be good.
Let me ask the last question to Sami Ramadani. In light of what we just heard tonight, do you ever see a light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, I think the light will only show at the end of the tunnel if we tackle the 3 problems I was talking about. And really, you need to start with the last one. I know it's the most difficult one, but Iraq needs to become an independent country. It needs to regain its sovereignty. There are basic structural problems that have been created. There is sectarianism at the top of the new Iraqi state that the occupation has created. This sectarianism and ethnic conflict and so on is at the heart of the political process, unfortunately.
Yes.
And some Iraqis have bought into this process. And unless we tackle these issues, these conflicts will continue eating into the body politics, into the body of Iraqi society in general.
Sami Ramadani.
We need to tackle this issue, and these symptoms that appear now and then have an underlying reason.
Sami Ramadani, Abdul Hadi Hassani. Gentlemen, thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq. To watch the show online, please visit our website, aljazeera.net/English. We have reached the end of this show. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Until then, this is Jasim Azzawi wishing you a great week.